live.
Howdy, everybody.
Hey, Lou. How's it going?
Greetings.
Just waiting for people to show up.
Yeah.
Got a few people here. So in
So
the
how
meantime,
many? Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say. So in the meantime, I suppose we could open up and explain what our intention here is primarily, and making a sequel to last week's stream.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to frame it in the context of, well, I mean, it's in the title of the stream, the Machine God. I'm, of course, making a Warhammer 40k reference, but there is a method to my madness. You see, a couple days ago, I was thinking about, well, I said it already, the Adeptus Mechanicus, and how it is that an incredibly technologically advanced society in general could possibly devolve into a bunch of robed maniacs going around engaging in occult rituals and making mystical movements and incantations and burning incense, specifically just to get the television to turn on. And then it occurred to me it's because all of that great and wonderful technology that existed in the past was all proprietary. Everything was hidden under copyright, under patent, and you weren't allowed to build it, modify it, or manufacture it without directly being under the employment of one particular corporation or another, one proprietary organization. And then I applied that to the present day, and you realize like just how applicable that is to today. Where like how many tech companies are there nowadays? Like 11, 12 in the world that make like everything: phones, TVs, dishwashers, cars, the electronic devices in cars more specifically, radios. It's not a very wide grip, is what I'm getting at. Not a lot of people doing it, unfortunately. So what this means is that the blueprints are kind of hard to get. They're locked behind copyright until you realize that the problem is actually a lot worse than people just simply not knowing how to make it. Have you ever looked, like have you ever popped open the hood of your car lately, or just a car, and take a look at the engine and just how bizarre labyrinthine they are? Does anyone know how to actually repair the particularly high-end vehicles, especially? It's very difficult, and there was a lot of instances of technology that is designed specifically to be unmodifiable. Apple, in particular, is notorious for making devices that are incredibly, incredibly difficult to repair, and even going so far as to make it so that it's illegal for in certain countries to have those devices be repaired at home or by independent shops. No, you have to go to an Apple store to get an Apple technician to repair your Apple device. You can't just get, aftermarket products to repair your own, or God forbid, 3D print your own parts to just repair and modify your own devices that, again, you supposedly own, but no, you don't actually own it. You just leased it from the proprietary organization. But what this leaves us in relation to the concept of the cargo cult, where people religiously worship technology, is that there's eventually going to be a point in time where the heavily specialized technicians that know how to repair Teslas, that know how to repair John Deere farm equipment, that know how to repair Apple devices, etc., they're not going to be with us forever. Just through sheer entropy, like they're going to die off. There's probably going to be some catastrophe. I can't possibly guess what it might be: war, natural disaster, some combination of a whole bunch of things. The point is, we can't rely on them to be around forever, and their expertise in how to repair these devices that were designed specifically to be as difficult as possible for people who are not approved by the corporation to be able to repair them, people are going to, just by sheer necessity, have to open up those devices and figure out how they work. However, because they are operating on incredibly incomplete understanding of the technology, they're going to make mistakes, and they're going to be doing all sorts of things that might seem strange and bizarre based on the incomplete information they have. Sure, they might even have a very comprehensive understanding of how the circuitry of a smartphone works, but do they know how to repair an Apple iPhone? Are they a certified technician with that level of expertise? Probably not. But that's just going to leave there's just going to leave multiple gaps in their knowledge. Inevitably, people are going to tinker. They're going to reverse engineer until they get something that kinda sorta works. The inevitable result of that is going to be a series of devices that float around at that period of time in the future that aren't properly understood and are only maintained through a series of practices and rituals that to us, and probably even to them at the time, are going to be utterly bizarre, but are going to be absolutely essential to how the device maintains itself. I can actually cite an example of this actually occurring, where probably going to be butchering this story, so feel free to look this up and correct me where I go wrong. But there was this USS Navy destroyer that had faulty radar equipment, and the technicians on board the ship were trying everything they could to try to get this radar equipment to work. And they were opening up the device, turning it off and on again, going through all of the maintenance rituals that they could think of, and nothing worked. Then some guy, just out of sheer exasperation and desperation, somehow got their hands on a live chicken, and they sacrificed the chicken to the radar equipment, put the chicken bones in a box, and put it up right next to the bulk of the radar machinery, and for no explicable reason, the radar started working perfectly. Now, when the ship ended up going to a proper dry dock to get a Navy engineer to examine it more closely, they couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. So what ended up happening is that the engineer's suggestion was just to keep the chicken bone box next to the radar equipment at all times. Now, do the manufacturers of that radar equipment actually require chicken bone sacrifices to work? No. Oh, certainly not. However, because the device is not only patented and copyrighted, but also its designs are locked under classification, no one knows who isn't the manufacturer is going to be able to make that radar equipment. They're not going to know how it works. So there's no way that they could possibly be able to diagnose what's going on and what the actual problem is. So what we're left is just with literal blood sacrifices. And that kind of stuff is going to just become, like, not the actual blood sacrifice part, but these strange rituals that are going to be borderline or just straight up mystical in nature are going to become more and more prevalent as people lose the ability to be able to create and maintain their own technology. You can imagine at some point in the future that if you're in an apartment building and the air conditioning goes down, you call up the air conditioner repair people, and what you see is 5 people in red robes walking up to the air conditioning unit. The head of this group just shouts, "Please work, you stupid machine." Meanwhile, the other robe cultists are just burning incense. And of course, they give it a couple smacks, and it starts working. And yeah, it sounds stupid. It sounds insane. But if it causes the machine to start working again, who's going to question it? Who's going to even challenge trying to come up with a ritual when they're the ones that obviously know best because they can get the machine to work? What, do you just not want the machine to work? It's not even like a rhetorical question. It's just a pressure that's going to exist within that environment, all because that this crap that we have nowadays is increasingly proprietary. All of this just to point out that, yeah, the trend in technology is towards the creation of these cargo cults that I'm attempting to describe, where nobody actually understands how the technology works and people are just engaging in rituals that they don't understand to attempt to achieve some technical end that is only understood through the mechanism or through the lens of just pure mysticism and woo. The way that
Well, unless you act.
sorry,
Oh, sorry. I thought you were done.
I
Thought
wasn't
you were
quite,
done.
yeah, I wasn't quite finished. I was just pointing out that yeah, they're this is why I had the stream titled the way it is, because modernity and the way that software and hardware is patented, copyrighted, and actively restricted from the populace being able to actually exercise ownership of the devices that supposedly they own, is they're creating a machine god. Only the god is not an internal process, not something that one cultivates within themselves as a form of self empowerment and self enrichment, but some mystical entity that one appeals to dogmatically for the purposes of ostensibly achieving some kind of technical end. Put simply, it's the shifting from the use of technical means to achieve technical ends to just pure mysticism. I can actually cite another example that people here are probably very familiar with. You remember back in during the COVID or during 2020 when COVID was around, and U.S. propaganda all over the place was just trust the science, trust the science.
Indeed.
Yeah, that's just another example of an attempt to. Well, oh, I'm trying to figure out what the term is. Attempting to equivocate the technique or equivocate mystical and technical technique as being one and the same. I mean, they're both techniques, don't get me wrong. However, one in this case, they're trying to make dogmatism a scientific process, which is just
Well, what it is, from a technical perspective, what it is it's the equivocation between a scientific phenomena, meaning it's a phenomenon that you know exists because you can represent it as a repeatable pattern that you can create whether or not your perception exists, and therefore you know that it's not a product of your imagination because of the fact that its existence has a basis independent of yourself. It's equating concepts based on this conceptual foundation with ideological or moral constructs, and ideological constructs within their own internal reasoning, because ideologies themselves are belief systems that people adopt as archetypes from a psychological perspective. um, the result of this is that it causes people to, from a psychological perspective, become emotionally invested in a perception of a technical description of a concept, because people equate a particular technical description of its nature with a moral claim about how it's expressed in the environment. So the result is that, from a psychological perspective, these concepts, in the role that they play within these people's belief systems, it begins to resemble a mythic construct comparable to the way people thought in the context of spirituality described gods or divine powers.
yeah. And I think it's worth bringing that to people's attention because as long as proprietary organizations continue to dominate or technology and technique as well as how it's counted, then this is the way that those techniques and technologies trend, where it's going to become increasingly dogmatic, and to the point where eventually it does just become a purely spiritualist exercise attempting to masquerade as a technical one. And the reason for that,
Yeah.
yeah, the
Oh,
sorry.
sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going to describe that way the way that we circumvent that is actually meant to be the topic of the stream. It's just that I wanted to bring this to people's attention because I actually think that this is something that should be kept in the back of everybody's mind for the purposes of helping them understand the importance of why it is that we are going to describe what we do and why it is that, well, put simply, we're going to need your help with, all of your help with trying to make sure that we are able to accomplish this goal of forking the internet and delivering as much technology and technique and make it as open source and accessible to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
So
Otherwise, everything's going to be like Archaeotech from Warhammer that you talk about so much, Filthy.
yep.
I mean, think about it like this: PCs from before the Windows 7 era to people who are like much younger than us, they don't even remember them. They wouldn't even know how to use them unless they like went and got one themselves and figured out how it worked. And it's going to be, the older the technology is getting, the more inscrutable it's going to become because the documentation is going to be lost to time.
Yeah,
People-
and there. Sorry.
People have to take active precautions against the deletion of the internet. People have to start archiving every website they can. People need to start learning how, like, something that I didn't get in the last stream because I got too tired to even get across any of this coherently, is that there are pieces of software out there right here and right now that allow you to download entire websites in a format called Zim. There's even a web browser-like software called eWix that allows you to view these Zim files offline. And then there's a service called Zimit that allows you to just give them a URL and it will recursively archive the entire website and turn it into a Zim file. And there is already an entire backup of Wikipedia out there, up to date, as a Zim file that you can download the entire English Wikipedia in about 100 gigabytes and then host it permanently offline. Even if the internet goes out, you'd still be able to search up anything that you would need to know about off of that archive. People need to start taking action towards doing that to all of the critical websites that are necessary, such as websites that document like operating system softwares, that document how game servers work, or document how to build things, or say even entire YouTube channels. You could start downloading them and then self-hosting mirrors of them on software like PeerTube, if anyone in the audience remembers me discussing that before, or even Odyssey, which is a front end for library. People need to start forking the internet. It's how do I put it?
Well, let's just say that
It all starts with you, and that you be everyone.
of all of the snafus that exist in modernity, the proprietary infrastructure of the internet, without any of the other issues that we addressed in the previous stream or are going to be discussing in greater detail here, it is hands down the biggest one at this point. It is key for the state preserving its existence and also controlling the techniques that people use in the context of their own economic relationships.
Right now on the stream, I have a browser open so that you all can see what we're talking about. Right now I have the Wikipedia article for the Zim file format. And yeah, all of these you can download Kiwix. You can see the link right there. And
I want you to, if you're on the link that I just gave you, I want you to scroll down. I want you to scroll down. I want you to notice that this is not default Wikipedia. I want you to read what the bottom section under the dotted line says to the audience.
let's see here. Is that part of the distributed Wikipedia Mirror project?
Yes.
Yeah,
This
I
article is
that.
issued from Wikipedia. This text is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike. Additional terms may apply for the media files. Distributed Wikipedia Mirror Project, powered by IPFS. I want you to right-click and open in a new tab that IPFS link, and then read that to the audience. And then look at all those other links there that show, like, see, Kiwix is right there. This exact copy of Wikipedia, this exact instance of Wikipedia was created in 2001, March. And it's stored on Kiwix, and this is the zim file that was used to make it right there. Wikipedia en all maxi 2021-02.zim. There's the HTTP link for the zim file format. There's the canonical link to the original Wikipedia page, so you can compare this instance's article to the current article to see the differences. You can see the snapshot source revision right there, so you can see exactly what's different. And then this whole thing is hosted over a third-party IPFS gateway. So you see right there, the entirety of Wikipedia English has already been distributed.
With 100 gigs, which I think most people who are watching this stream right now, or will be watching it in the future, you have the file space to be able to host Wikipedia. And you have, like, I wouldn't say you have the Library of Alexandria on your computer, but you still have, like, a vast quantity of information regarding humanity, history, biology, chemistry, physics, mathematics, all sorts of just pop culture, all sorts of crazy topics. That's more than enough for you to hypothetically rebuild civilization in a truly apocalyptic scenario. Now, I'm not saying like we need to do this for like prepare for an apocalyptic scenario by having an offline download of Wikipedia. That's not at all what we're suggesting. However, having this on hand and having multiple people have their own versions that they can compare themselves and compare their own versions against. Even make your own edits if you so wished, because it's downloadable onto your computer. You own it. You just make whatever edits you want. You can say George Washington was black. I don't care.
Here. Open up that link that I just sent you there. What if you took that zim file and decompressed it into all of the articles? And, okay, wrong page. This one. Edit this image, this link. I want you to read to the audience about that.
Give me a moment here. There we go. Fossil. Did it load? Okay. Let's give me a moment here. Okay, some of the parts are cropped off. Let's see if I can't fix that. It's still going to be cropped off a little bit. It's fine. Actually, no, it's... Okay, this is annoying.
I suppose I could state just something I was going to elaborate more on earlier, which is this is a perfect example of a norm that's emerged in modernity that now has to exist out of technical necessity for the state to sustain itself as a result of the proprietary server infrastructure being necessary for the internet to be able to coexist with a political economy, because this is what's required in order for a state trying to coexist with the internet to be able to coordinate on a scale that would allow it to survey property titles in an environment where the internet's present. Yeah, this is as a result of the state needing this pressure to exist. Well, now a psychological phenomenon has emerged which has basically set what you could consider political economies, the internal norms of them, on a crash course to basically needing to either consciousness or destroy the organization models internally maintaining them. Because the only way for the state to be able to preserve this infrastructure with the incentives that people are directly employing their means towards achieving their most highly valued preferences in an environment where someone can use all of these methods to become self-sufficient is the solution that the state has come to and has been made evident in how they're designing these proprietary platforms on the internet and how they're curating content to people, which is they're going to try to change people themselves in order to try to be compatible with political economies going forward.
Literally, I could make a perfect point here. U.S. law classifies any organism that integrates mRNA into cDNA, which is coding DNA, as patentable. So all of the bioweapon shots that have been put out by these medical corporations that were backed by the government have legal claim over everyone who's taken the shot to patent their genome if they so chose to.
I distinctly remember that Michael Crichton, author of Jurassic Park, wrote a book. I don't remember what the book was called, but one of the storylines involved a company that was going out of its way to try to patent everything under the sun biologically, including to the point where they were copyrighting individual people because they happened to have a copyright on that specific genetic sequence that person happened to have. And now it's just like that was...
I don't know, audience. Do you want to see the Blade Runner timeline become real, but instead of it being one single megacorp, it's all of the governments in the world making a fork of the human genome that's entirely proprietary, that they use as a slave workforce, that has consciousness genetically removed from them?
It is not a very pleasant experience. I mean, I've had some... The good news about the cyberpunk genre in general is that when it's written, it's kind of just written under the assumption that these megacorps that typically serve the role of antagonist in the story is some monolithic entity that, although they can be fought against and even damaged, there's nothing external to the conflict itself or the conflict depicted in the narrative that otherwise presents itself as a threat to the ability for the megacorporations to be able to maintain themselves. I can't imagine a situation where, say, you're living in Night City in Cyberpunk 2077, where there wouldn't be what's the term? Jailbroken cybernetics. Open source software just going into bionic implants. I mean, who wouldn't want that?
Well, at that point, you're talking about open source BioWare.
No.
And that's where we're
kind of, yeah.
With the current dynamics that civilizations across the world are creating due to everything that we've witnessed in the past couple years, people are going to have to start gene sequencing themselves and curing their own diseases because the healthcare companies are now death propagation companies.
Pretty much. I mean, their entire organization model is for revenue maximization, not profit maximization, since profit is a purely subjective experience. And in order for me to describe something as a profit maximization, I would have to answer, well, what do you mean by profit? Which, don't get me wrong, is a fair question to ask, but given the nature of the corporate entity, what they count as profit is the ability to acquire greater revenue than what they receive in costs. And given that they can just externalize those costs to the public, well, it kind of just goes to show that their sole purpose is, well, revenue maximization. And if they can install ransomware into people's bodies, then suddenly, holy crap, this is a great revenue stream. And as a result, well, I mean, you're kind of seeing it with the death jab, where people who took the COVID-19...
Pretty much.
People who took the COVID-19 quote-unquote vaccine have, like, comically greater risk of various adverse health events. They're more likely to get sick. The rate of turbo cancers is absolutely freaking absurd. They've got blood clots all over the place that turn their blood into freaking spaghetti. There's these weird crystalline structures that have been observed in the blood of people who took the death jab. There's prions growing in their brains. The rate of dementia is just inexplicably skyrocketing. I mean, I say inexplicably because people who otherwise don't have the context that we have and the knowledge that we have would just see it like going up 300, 400%. And just be like, what the heck is happening? Well, gee, I wonder what changed in the last 3 or 4 years. But anyways, yeah. Point is, governments have figured out that the best way to control people right now is to not only create a situation where they can just put copyrights onto people's genetic sequences, but install ransomware onto their bodies such that people see the state and their corporate partners as being absolutely essential for them just simply not dying. You're going to have to be taking these pills. They're going to be taking these pills for the rest of your life to fix a chronic condition that they caused.
I don't know if anyone in the audience watches British television, but there was a whole TV series that was like predictive programming for this exact shit called Orphan Black.
Yeah, and I was just going to state quite ominously that states recently have, aside from very blatantly starting to incorporate the tropes into their propaganda model that are consistent with states historically that have gone on to do mass purges, also while having a very strong organizational interest to do so. The U.S. government has also, goddamn, that completely derailed my train of thought. I'm sorry, where I was going with that. Right. I got it again. Yeah, there's a technical necessity on the part of government and proprietary organization models to sustain themselves that no longer have any purpose in the tools that people would employ to actually manage their lives. So the state, in order to try to keep people invested in political economies, is now just outright psychologically raping people. And not gradually through suggestion, grooming people into the process of looking at themselves as a citizen, like propaganda models previously. No, propaganda models in the current environment now have the ability to go beyond suggestion and just outright through psychological molestation techniques. Just outright make you create propositions to yourself outside of your own conscious perception through steering you to frame a concept to yourself in your own internal reasoning in such a way where you make a proposition simply following the way concepts are being described through aesthetic signals. So it's gotten to the point where people can essentially just have their brains turned off and sleepwalk their way through life and have a career. I mean, not quite that brain dead, but yeah, you never have to actually think about the internal reasoning behind why you inform your own sense of profit, or you never. Not only do you never have to scrutinize your own internal reasoning to make ends meet, but also uh, you're directly disincentivized from doing so, because a lot of the social stigmas that the states introduced to the new propaganda model is just directly aimed at promoting anti-intellectualism. Like, just outright the idea that if you narcissistically double down, you can just will to power your perspective, everyone into going along with it. Um, as like an ideological power move, regardless of whether or not the behavior people would be acting in response to is an actual pressure in the environment. So the fact that it's getting to the point where organizations now, as a technical purpose of their continued existence, need people to perform these behaviors with no purpose, logically means that people are, going to need to have their psyches radically altered at the very least. There's simply no way around this. Like, if you want to be able to continue existing with a sense of individuality and the ability to critically think and actually control your own sense of identity and what you do and who you associate with, in any sense, you have to be basically an active rebellion to political economies in practice.
Anyways, I do have the page for Fossil open, so Douglas, you want to explain Fossil?
Sure. It's if anyone in the audience is familiar with Git or Mercurial, Fossil is a distributed version control system. So, like, I'll give an example. Say you have a file that every edit you wanted to make to it, you could record the history of those edits as a stream of history. Fossil is like Git and Mercurial do that, but Fossil takes that a step further in being capable of also doing bug tracking wiki. So, say an entire wiki website could be hosted in Fossil. Form, email alerts, there's an inbuilt chat system, and tech notes. So it also says that it has a built-in, themable, extensible, intuitive web interface with a rich variety of information pages. It has examples there. You could open those up if you want. And it gives the example of the entire website. This current website is a running instance of Fossil. So the pages that are seen here are all wiki and embedded documentation. In the case of the download page, are unversioned files. So when you clone Fossil from one of its self-hosting repositories, you get more than just the source code. You get the entire website here. So imagine if you used this to make your own website and self-host your own website. Imagine if you then took that and then took all of those Zim files that you can get off of Kiwix and then just made a giant website that just networks all of the hyperlinks together between websites. You could literally have your own local image of the internet, like your own personal internet archive, except that you would have version control over it, which means that you could make edits and changes to them and publish those edits and changes and even add entire new web pages and then publish those to the internet, and people could then fork that off of your copy.
You can also compare your own version of websites to other people's websites, and once you've been able to establish that connection, you have a very basic internet.
Yeah, not only would you have a basic internet, but you would have a way to compare different narratives against each other. So say you wouldn't have a single narrative of history anymore. You would be able to write your own autobiography and publish it using this method. Imagine self-publishing your own autobiography
It's more than that.
Yeah,
as like
imagine
a wiki.
it's more than that. Imagine being able, like, if you're good about logging all of the developments and all of the changes that you make, you essentially have a log about the way you think and the way that you process information. By being able to
Imagine that
demonstrate
you
that
also
through your, but being able to demonstrate that through the things that you consider to be important, how you choose to fix a thing. Sort of the same thing as like
yeah, you
watching
have a
someone.
way to reflect yourself.
It's sort of like the same thing with like art streams and being able to see how particular artists approach certain or approach drawing. You can actually see this a bit with Leonardo da Vinci and a lot of his incomplete works and sketches, and see like the technical method that he employs to try to get the expressions, shapes, faces, etc. to be as realistic as possible.
Also consider that since this uses SQLite databases as its file format, it means that all transactions are atomic, which means that even if there was an interrupt of a power loss or system crash, the files would all still be in a self-consistent state. Which means that you can avoid most forms of corruption using that method, especially if you used error-correcting codes.
Let's see if I can't get the Kiwix link open really quick.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
I wanted you to take a look at the library page for the Kiwix page. I linked it right there, library.kiwix.
Yep,
That shows you every wiki that has been archived to Kiwix already. And I want you to scroll through that on stream slowly. Can you do that?
I have it open right now, and we got. I don't even know what that
Point
is.
out the ones that you recognize.
I'm trying to figure out what that is. It just says English QA for linguists, etymologists, and serious English language enthusiasts. I'm guessing that's Japanese Stack Overflow, Rational Wiki, 2 Rational Wikis, Wiki University, Bitcoin Wiki, Wikipedia. There it is in all of its 109 gigabyte glory.
109 gigs.
Python documentation.
See,
This is not going to be all the ones I recognize. Marxists.org. That probably actually be a very good resource. Explain XKCD. Don't know anything about that. The Infosphere. Also don't know anything about that.
That's the Futurama wiki.
No, there you go. So Futurama wiki is there.
Says it right under those descriptions.
I probably went back. Dojo Docs. Also don't know what that is. Go.docs if you want to go into game development and interested in the Go engine. And right now I'm just scrolling. I'm trying to see if anything catches. Right now it's just like documentation for a whole bunch of websites.
Yeah, there's a lot of variety.
Yeah.
C docs, so the entire C programming language is documented here.
Python PEPs, don't know what that refers to. Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
And that's just what's here now.
Yeah.
You can upload your own stuff to Kiwix if you set up your own local server. You just need to make your own zim files and then upload them to your local server, and then other people would download them, and then they propagate across the network.
I don't know if anyone saw Bulbapedia appeared twice on there. Mathematics,
Epic.
chemistry. Oh, look at this. Business Libre texts, biology Libre texts, biology courses and bookshelves. So, actually, let's check this out. I'm kind of curious. What's here?
What is here?
Which one did you click?
Biology and... Alright, so I clicked on biology Libre texts, and it has home, bookshelves,
First thing that popped up.
Yeah, campus bookshelves. So, I don't know, Los Angeles Harbor College, let's see what they got.
Let's go to the biology wiki. First thing that pops up is a graphic photo of a woman giving birth.
Oh god. No, this
No.
looks like part of a college course for biology from a specific. Oh, it's a biology lecture actually. So we have a transcript of a lecture from a university, and you just have a whole bunch of universities here on one particular topic. Bookshelves.
I want you to go down and look at Khan Academy at the bottom.
Hold on.
Detailed description of.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we scrolled through this before, and yeah, the entirety of Khan Academy is just here. It might be a while. It might be a while before I get there, mind you. So Linux main pages docs. That's actually going to be quite useful. I don't know what the heck Don't know what the heck that is.
People get the idea, though. You could find just about everything here already, but you could add your own stuff.
Mm-hmm. Point is, like, we have...
It's not difficult.
Yeah, at the top was Wikipedia, and here you can just find a lot of content, like a lot of TED Talk stuff here related to...
All TED Talks ever made, you can download them. It's right at the bottom. Every TED Talk that's ever been posted, you could download the whole thing.
Man, how big would this... I mean, right now, these are just like TED Talks divided specifically into subtopics.
Into categories.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. I think we're at
But then all of TED is right at the bottom.
Okay, so all TED videos are listed here at 80 gigabytes.
Not bad.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to start...
Hold on a second. I just want to point out that I did get to Khan Academy. That's 180 gigabytes right there. Which, I mean, don't get me wrong. I know that's not a small file, but, I mean, come on. It's
that's
like
a cool college there.
That's more than a college. That's like all of the college courses you could possibly want.
There's a Vsauce at the bottom.
Yeah, Minefield.
Yeah, Vsauce, Minefield. That's pretty cool.
That's not even 2 gigabytes, so...
Yeah, but imagine this. Imagine that you took the Khan Academy Zim file, decompressed it into all of the articles, and then imported that into a fossil repository, and then started making your own college curriculum based off of it.
Well, right now I've just clicked on Khan Academy to see what's there. Subdivided into 8 categories, including Khan for educators, so they have resources if you want to teach this stuff. Physics, AP physics, electrical engineering. Sorry?
Imagine making tutor software out of this to make it so that you could have a personal open source AI agent that was plugged into the entire Khan Academy database, and then had another program to cross-check whether or not it's hallucinating. You would have your own personal college professor.
Oh yeah, like, I think we were talking about this before, like IBM Watson, which got notoriety in was it 2000s or 2010s, a long ass time ago.
Yeah, it won Jeopardy. You want to know how it worked? I actually researched this. They literally had the entirety of Wikipedia in RAM. They just had I think gigabytes and gigabytes of RAM, and then they just had IBM Watson just pull information directly from the RAM instance of Wikipedia to answer questions, which means that if you can download the entirety of Wikipedia now using Kiwix, and you can self-host your own personal open source LLM, and you can use something called, Retrieval Augmented Generation?
Someone in chat was asking for a link to Kiwix, so
yeah, it's just.
I've been posting every single link in our personal chat here. We should be uploading these to the thing.
Yeah, sounds like a good idea. Yeah, the thing, the place. You know what I mean. But yeah, like this point is that just from what's available here right now. This is...
You could make a personal AI smarter than a college. It might run slow as shit if you don't have good hardware, but you could probably quantize it to make it run fast.
Yeah, and just trade.
The point is that if you had enough RAM and you had enough storage space, you could download all of Khan Academy, all of Wikipedia, and all of TED Talk videos ever posted. And then if you made a neural network that processed all of that content, you could literally ask it any question. Oh yeah, why don't we tell everyone about TMA Live? Remember that?
TMA Live. It's on the tip of my tongue.
It's the one we used to make all of those informative videos. It was really useful.
Right, yeah.
And even more, yeah, and the developer of that, in his Hacker News post, released exactly how he made it. So all of the components are already open source. It would just be a matter of figuring out how to reconstruct it locally, and then plug that locally self-hosted large language model or neural network into this data set, and you would have your own personal AI that could make you tutorial videos on anything.
Mm-hmm.
And you could literally just keep improving it until it made high-quality content. You would have a personal tutor. College is obsolete at that point, because all it would take then is for you to then take the information resources from, remember how I said Fossil has a collaboration inbuilt chat system?
Yes.
Imagine if every researcher uploaded their public domain, like arxiv.org, you know that website?
I do not.
Imagine if every researcher... here, I'll post it. Imagine if every researcher that released their research public domain all collaborated together on making data sets to make education resources for everyone. And this would then mean that all live information would just get directly plugged in to these open source research models for collaborative research across the planet, where everyone could teach each other and cross-reference the information against each other, and then even just, you wouldn't need peer review anymore at that point. You'd just be able to cross-reference and prove that things are correct.
Just be able to demonstrate the repeatable patterns in what you're attempting to describe, and everybody is just able to... It's a constant state of people being able to check upon it and improve it, and in the absence of political rule encouraging proprietary organizations to continue to exist, this nonsense that incentivizes people to need to feel like they're correct about everything all the time, just I can't imagine that would persist for very long in the absence of the state.
You wouldn't have people financially invested on whether they're correct or not, or holding on to a point despite it being wrong because their job depends upon it anymore. You would have truly collaborative research, and it would feedback loop on itself in such a way that it would benefit everyone. Especially because consider if you had a neural network where every input that changed its weights was logged atomically. You would be able to trace the exact effects that every piece of information has on the weight structure of the neural network with a history. And at that point, you would be able to see exactly how the thought process of the training works, because you'd be able to reverse engineer it. It wouldn't be a black box anymore.
Because its rules would be procedurally generated themselves as a result of something like a set of rules that's defined that essentially serves as the function of the program. It's a function that exists for the purpose of being the base for rules that then emerge as a result of it existing. A very abstract way of putting it.
You have just a vast amount of content.
And I didn't even get into some of the other topics. We kind of just derailed into into speculative there, but why don't we go back to the biology topic earlier? Remember how we were how we ended up tangenting into the bioweapon
Actually,
and
it's
healthcare?
right. I want to segue into that in a specific way because Barracon did ask, are flu shots from before 2020 also able to be used to patent human DNA? How is it that we can fork for the actually useful vaccines like rabies or tetanus or the MMR shot? Is that right?
mRNA.
I think no. I think she did mean MMR.
Messenger
I think
ribonucleic acid.
no, not mRNA. Like she said that in the context of rabies or tetanus. In other words, vaccines that are actually vaccines, not.
Okay, well then the difference between the mRNA technology and old style vaccines is that you took an actual sample of the virus and then you damaged it specifically so that it couldn't reproduce, and then you would inject it into someone's bloodstream in such a way that the immune system could then detect the parts of the virus that are inactive and then create antibodies for the dead bits of virus. And then what would happen is that the immune system would then recognize the foreign invader immediately instead of having to figure out how to defend against it on the spot. So the old style vaccines actually assisted the immune system in understanding a threat ahead of time by giving it a sample of a damaged virus to understand what it's looking at ahead of time. Making it so that when you encountered the actual virus, when you got infected with the actual virus, the actual live one that was in the environment, the immune system would be able to attack it immediately because it knows how to respond to it already, because it already made antibodies to its parts. That's how originally vaccines worked.
Yeah, I brought that up specifically so that we could talk about what we were talking earlier before about in biology and how the death jab works. I say
okay, so how the death jab worked in the documentation is the mRNA sequence codes for the spike protein of the virus, and then what happens is that it gets taken up into the cells, and then the mRNA gets read by the ribosomes of the cells and converted back into cDNA, which is coding deoxyribonucleic acid. And then that gets integrated with your genome permanently. So what ends up happening is the spike protein, just like as if you had gotten infected with the virus, gets added to your DNA, and then your cells start expressing the spike protein as a molecule on their surface. And then what happens is that your immune cells, if they've already encountered the spike protein, will detect it as a threat, and then will attack your cells that are expressing the spike protein. But the thing is, though, is that instead of actually defending against the virus, this is making it so that every cell that's infected will create an autoimmune response, where the immune system will attack the body directly.
It's also the source of it, that this autoimmune response is primarily the source of the inflammation that's very, very common in a lot of people that took the death jab, and particularly a lot of pulmonary, which is to say heart problems, because a lot of the swelling does take place in the heart. What's the name of that heart condition where it swells and causes scarring?
Because consider what actually is happening is not what they actually intend. Well, I'm not even going to say that. They could have fully intended this for all I know, and they probably did. But the thing is, though, is that the actual effect that's occurring is that if the cells express the spike protein and it integrates that as part of their biology, this means that as the immune cells attack the cells that are expressing that spike protein, it also means that antibodies are being created for cell parts that are non-viral. Which means that parts of your body that are not actually virus are getting identified as virus. You see what's going to happen then.
Yep, you create an autoimmune disorder that the body will begin to attack the cells, your own cells, on the basis, one's body will begin to produce antibodies that causes the immune system to attack its own cells because it was tricked, for want of a better
I'll
phrase.
put it in computer terms. Imagine a virus hides itself as System 32, and the anti-malware detects the virus and then deletes System 32.
Yeah. Suffice to say, you're not going to have a computer for very long. So that's part of the thing that gets people to come to a conclusion that the death jab was originally part of a mass purge, which, I mean, all I can say is that
at the very minimum, it was mass human experimentation.
Yeah. And the way I see it, I think it's just, like, the conclusion that I've come to is that the actions taken are consistent with attempting to maximize revenue for proprietary pharmaceutical organizations by maximizing human suffering. It's like...
Which comes back to the other thing we talked about, in that the only solution to this is to take your own healthcare in your own hands by learning how to make DIY medicine again. Literally, we have to bring back the apothecaries.
Yeah, and I would like to state very quickly, in case this stream in case anyone wants to try to cite TOS about medical disinformation, quote unquote, not a single thing that we've just stated is scientifically inaccurate. So if that's going to be pulled, I would like to know specifically what is being considered scientifically inaccurate.
Not only that, but you can literally quote the patent documents from before the virus ever got into the public, where there's a patent documentation that shows that the virus itself was engineered, was I think it was a type of flu virus that was specifically genetically engineered to have gene sequences from human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, making it so that it was a flu virus that had the genes specifically that allows it to bypass the human immune system.
And also it wasn't based on the flu virus, it was based on SARS, which, unless I'm mistaken...
Which is the flu virus.
It emerged in 2005. And
which is also suspect when you ask me.
It is.
Because I remember the SARS treatments also backfiring back then too.
Yeah, like there was an attempt to produce an mRNA jab to create or to inoculate against it, but the program was pulled because it was significantly more dangerous than SARS itself actually was. Which
so I would just like to clarify that that the position of the Backalley and that what we're claiming specifically is not meant to disparage the use of vaccines or even the use of mRNA techniques as being the basis for creating them. Only that the ones that the government...
mRNA technology to cure cancer if you figured out how to do it yourself. It's not bad technology. It was used as a weapon against the public. It shouldn't be in the hands of the corporations and governments.
Just what I was going to say very quickly is that our perspective is not that vaccines are bad for you, it's that the ones the government is mass producing are obviously intended to make your immune system attack itself, and that is not a technically inaccurate statement. We can show you exactly what it is about the jabs that were being produced by Pfizer that causes this reaction, and in fact, Doug just explained it in great detail.
I want to make a mocking statement towards certain individuals, but I feel like that would be rude.
It wasn't just Pfizer; it was all of the other drug companies as well. Bayer, Moderna. What is it? You ever heard of Merck?
Yeah.
Or Merrick?
Yeah.
Yeah. All of them.
Oh, I mean,
This is a perfect time. This is a perfect time to go click the Four Thieves Vinegar Collective link, because there is something that I want to show you.
Hold
Go
on.
open it up.
I'm trying to find it. Sorry, it got a little buried here. Oh, there it is. And
I want you
entered
to
the wrong
show it
browser.
to the crowd. Like scroll down and like show it to the crowd.
Yeah. All right. So I like this. You can see right here, like just on the front page, first thing you see, right to repair for your body. I think
Exactly.
just about everyone can get behind that. I, of course, have an issue with the abortion defense nonsense right there, but
If people decide to do what they're gonna do with chemicals, then there's no stopping them. But
yeah,
at the same time, it doesn't mean I'm gonna approve of it.
I'm not going to approve of it. I'm not going to support it. But you know what? Just give me the DIY pharmaceutical tech. I'm cool. And DIY dental care as well. That's going to.
Oh
be,
yeah.
I really there's really not much for that I can say about dental stuff because my knowledge about that is fairly limited. Other than stay away from fluoride because fluoride is bone hurting juice.
I find that actually funny because in the dental care section, the tooth seal that they invented uses sodium fluoride and silver nanoparticles to seal your teeth.
Yep, nano silver fluoride. Silver I know is safe.
Yeah.
But I think the logic behind including fluoride
Putting
is
the
because
fluoride in the toothpaste and the water, I don't think is a good idea, though.
yeah, so let me elaborate here. I said that fluoride is bone hurting juice because chemically it bonds to the same parts in your bones and your teeth that calcium ordinarily binds to. And as I'm sure you're aware, when calcium binds to a material, it typically hardens it. Fluoride doesn't cause any hardening whatsoever, and all it does is just take up space that calcium would ordinarily occupy. So as a result, it actually makes it
That's
harder for calcium. Sorry?
It's not correct, okay? First of all, sodium chloride, salt. Sodium fluoride, also salt, but slightly bigger because fluorine is bigger than chlorine. Calcium fluoride is what happens when calcium bonds with fluorine. So what's actually going on here is the nano silver fluoride uses the ingredients. It doesn't. Let's see. Where is it? Uses. Here, I have it. Open this link.
Okay, Mr. Magic Man. I didn't hear you also say Big McThankies from McSpankies to the customer.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Salt is not sodium chloride. Salt also has caking agents and iodine, so that you don't get goiter. Look up goiter if you want some horror.
My God.
Just by just the name itself sounds unpleasant.
Yeah, imagine your thyroid swelling up like a tumor. That's what happens when you don't have iodine supplementation.
Oof.
Yeah.
Well,
And that's why salt, table salt, is not the same as just raw sodium chloride. So yes, Jimmy Neutron was very wrong.
I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's very important that you sound smart.
See,
Regardless of
the
your
real
actual-
problem with sodium fluoride is when you put it in the water, you're drinking it, which means your body's having to process that out. And I understand that when you're young, your blood-brain barrier is not as strong, and so the sodium fluoride can pass through the blood-brain barrier and get stuck in your brain and cause brain damage. So, also, you could say the same is true for when you're old. So, the sodium fluoride being used as a bonding agent in maybe like toothpaste, but putting it in the water, that's just straight poisoning people. Because people are going to drink that. I mean, they don't tell people to swallow mouthwash, right? You spit it out.
And even then, like normally you rinse, even after you spit it out, you rinse with water and spit that out too.
Yeah, you rinse out the toothpaste too, because you don't want that stuff sticking in your mouth. But consider that the tooth seal that they invented here is just a combination of sodium fluoride and silver nanoparticles that bonds it together. And so the reason why they use silver nanoparticles is because silver nanoparticles have a direct antibacterial and I think an antiviral effect, but that one I'm a bit more iffy on and whether or not it's true, so I could be wrong. But I know it explicitly is antibacterial. So if you were to bond that to the surface of your teeth after giving your teeth a very thorough like dental cleaning, you wouldn't have to go back to your dentist again because you would have the same antibiotic effect that silver surgical tools have, where they just kill bacteria on contact. So imagine never having plaque again because the bacteria just die if they try and colonize the surface of your teeth.
Yeah, so it's better than anything that a dentist is going to do for you.
Pretty much, yeah. And you could just, let's see here.
You can make it. Here, they have the link to it right here as a PDF.
I'm trying to look for the link to the PDF right here on the page, but...
Oh, I'll link it to you to save you some time.
Oh, I got it.
It's literally on the dental care section.
Yep, there it is.
But that's only the start.
That's a very
consider the DIY pharmaceutical section. Like, go down to the Vinny section. Go open that up in a new tab.
Vinny?
Virtual research assistant. Yeah. The little plague doctor research assistant AI thing there. It says it's in early alpha. Open that in a new tab, and notice that it has you do like a CAPTCHA. I want you to show that CAPTCHA on screen.
Well, first off, I have to figure out where it is.
Okay, on the main website, scroll down. In the Microlab Suite section, it's literally the bottom right. Vinny. Right-click and open that in new tab.
I am very bad at finding things.
Okay, go to the main website.
I am on the main website.
fourthievesvinegar.org. You're on the main website. Scroll down past the Thank You CCC section. Go to the Microlab section. And then continue scrolling down. And then right next to Microlab, Apothecarium, and Chem Hacketa, there's a section. There's a link that says Vinny.
Oh, I see it.
Right-click it and open it in a new tab. And then I want you to show that CAPTCHA to the audience.
But their section in DIY pharmaceuticals. First of all, that's not pretty much just exclusively a euphemism for hard drugs. There's actually very useful guides for creating medicines or just designing your own chemical reactors that are almost
Imagine being able to make your own steroids.
Almost exclusively based on
make your own hormones, make your own Imagine you had hypothyroidism and the drug companies are extorting the shit out of you for your thyroid drug. Imagine you could make the chemistry of that thyroid drug yourself for cheaper than the cost the insurance companies are forcing you to pay.
There's a a lot more as well. There's the EpiPen problem, where those things are just outrageously
Oh
expensive.
yeah, imagine insulin being $20.
There's also, and off the top of my
Just
head,
look at yourself.
it's also extremely difficult for pain patients, people who injured their spine at some point and are now like in excruciating pain all the time, and they need opioids just to be able to function basically, and they're not able to get it because the current
Yeah, imagine being able to make your own painkillers.
yeah, the current opioid epidemic in major metropolitan areas all across the United States is being scapegoated by doctors who are too willing to give out pain medicine. As a result, people who actually need it are just getting, well, they're suffering, to say the least. So being able to make your own painkillers is going to be tremendously helpful
Also,
for these
imagine
people.
figuring out the chemistry to make your own. Imagine being able to figure out the chemistry enough to engineer your own synthetic drug that gives you the painkiller effect, but you've neutralized the side effects, and then releasing the chemical formula for it on something like GitHub for other people to fork and modify and publish mods to. Imagine literally just being able to, like, I want you to, like, did you open up the Vinny thing, and then did you show the audience the captcha yet?
Yes, I did. Name the pharmaceutical, or click on the pharmaceutical companies that haven't settled for $500 million or more.
For off-label promotion for kickbacks. And then it's none.
Yep. Unfortunately, I could tell right away that it was not interactable. It was just, I mean, it's interactable. You can click on it.
Sure.
It's
You just have to click the skip.
the problem is it's a JPEG. It's a flat image.
Yeah. It's
Just
kind of
what I wanted to note is we were discussing the prospect of bringing back the apothecaries as a practice earlier, as though it was to clarify, we're not discussing that like anything else that we're bringing to the table, as though it's an ideal that steps away from what's presently possible. Here is essentially exactly how any person right now would be able to set up, at the very least, a chemical reactor for themselves that would be able to get rid of their dependence on pharmaceutical companies for most painkillers and treatments to several diseases.
Right now,
Imagine being able to engineer your own cancer drugs. Imagine being able to cure your own Lyme's disease. Imagine being able to produce a drug that cures you of muscular dystrophy, which, by the way, there is one, which is called peptide nucleic acid sequences, where you would take make a PNA sequence for the defective gene that causes the muscular dystrophy, and the PNA will basically mute that gene. And then if you take that long enough, your cells will reproduce without the damaged gene.
You'll have to take it for several years, but it could definitely be done.
Or hell, why not just make your own CRISPR kit and then just give yourself a corrected version of the muscular dystrophy gene and then knock the damaged one out?
And all of the techniques that we're bringing up, they're not cost intensive at all. I mean, the cost is primarily just getting the resources required to make all of it. But as far as input required for it to be...
Please, anyone who attempts this, do so with caution.
Yeah.
These are instructions. You could seriously hurt yourself or others.
Yeah. Let's not downplay that by any means, or, to clarify, we're not downplaying that aspect of it. That this is actually experimenting with chemistry, you need to treat it as such. And it's more dangerous than even preparing potentially poisonous food, because this shit can also explode in your face or turn into gases. But it's depending on what you're making.
Accidentally turbo cancer. You don't want that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was
But
going to say really
used right. If used right.
Hold on.
All right, go ahead.
I was just going to add, as far as the chemical reactors they're advertising and all of the ingredients that's required to make the very simple things that the Four Thieves Vinegar Collective are actually advertising, not the hypothetical scenarios we've just been describing. Yeah, it costs like in the range of like a few $100s, and then as far as actually sustaining it beyond that point, yeah, you could cultivate plants with the ones that you're growing for food that would be able to be usable in the process of creating medicine.
Yeah, imagine being able to make your own cup of coffee from scratch.
They have on the microlab test project caffeine extraction as one of the things.
Yeah, like imagine just removing the caffeine directly and then storing it as powder and then making instant coffee whenever you want.
You could just put it anywhere you want. And it looks like they have a step-by-step thing for how to do so. I can't say I have much of it.
Want to point out.
Sorry?
I want to point out that their do-it-yourself micro lab there is only 0.6 as of spring 2024. But that's actually why I wanted you to pull up that arxiv.org article there on the computer and computation. Because consider if somebody reverse engineered that and then used that to upgrade the DIY microlab to make a universal chemical CNC machine to make any chemical that you need, and then just use that to manufacture that chemical. And consider that also expands to biochemistry. Imagine creating entirely synthetic cells from scratch.
I mean, you can already bioengineer viruses with the CRISPR kit.
Consider making the viral cure to cancer.
Well, the bad news is that, given the way that cancer works, there's never going to be the cure, at least that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
But
you can at least target specific types.
Yep. But what you can do is you can get, if you can identify the cancer itself and get a sample, then you can begin experimenting with ways to destroy it in such a way that is completely compatible with your biochemistry.
There's in fact, easy. A specific example of this. There was an article that I saw just recently. I'd have to pull it up, but I heard there was a virologist out there somewhere who figured out that she had cancer, and instead of panicking, or maybe she did, I don't know, but all I heard is that she used her knowledge of virology to synthesize a virus that specifically targeted her cancer and cured her own cancer by killing it with that synthesized virus. So if a virologist could do that, anyone could do that with enough study and effort.
And we're providing materials.
Fuck all of these cancer charities. They are perpetuating the problem.
They are cancer maximizers. I said so in Socrates versus Freedom.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, I mean, there are some, depending on the type of cancer, like any cancer that's just a tumor growing on an organ, or like a tumor growing on a single tumor growing on some part of your body, there are some just stupidly easy ways to kill them. Like, you could kill a tumor by injecting it with xylitol.
You could literally go on a pure keto diet and then consume artificial sweeteners, and then the cancer cells would be poisoned by the artificial sweeteners. Meanwhile, your regular healthy cells will be able to not be poisoned by it because they know how to get rid of it.
Yeah, so basically just
consider that cancer cells are mostly like zombies. They don't have any of the complex cellular machinery that normal healthy cells do. They're basically reproducing without any safety checks, and so are damaging all of their critical infrastructure internally. They're just reproducing at any cost.
They they feed on glucose in
Basically,
order to be able to, your cells or cancer feeds on glucose in order to be able to reproduce. While healthy cells do as well, they don't need to. So all you gotta do is just avoid carbs, avoid sugar entirely. That includes lactose, that includes fructose, that includes all that stuff, and just focus entirely on fats and proteins, and you'll be cancer free eventually.
you'd starve out the
JC
cancer.
Armit JC Armitage asks, "You mean she eliminated the cancer completely with no chance of it coming back?" Probably not.
From what I heard,
Yeah, I've heard similar stories of experiments done, and these treatments could be like outrageously expensive in hospitals, like $100,000. But these treatments that have been tested have been extremely promising, with remission rates as low as 80%. And I say low because let's just say that it's so effective that the first treatment alone usually eradicates the cancer, with those that don't have a 100% success rate after the second treatment. So it's pretty good. And all these techniques that I've
Well, I
seen
mean,
all
yeah.
operate kind of the similar way, where you inject viruses into your body that are tailored to the type of tumor you have, and you just wait a day and then you're cancer free.
Yeah, I mean, you have better chances doing that at the very least
found the
than
article.
you do trying to seek quote unquote treatments from white market hospitals. Because I mean, just simply look at how they talk about cancer and how the state discusses cancer in the context of its propaganda model versus how trivial some of these known methods for killing tumors are that have been known about for decades make treating the problem in a way that actually kills the cancer and doesn't make someone dependent on some sort of treatment that requires them to gradually pay over the course of months and doesn't actually do anything about the cancer.
It is the way chemo works is just straight up barbaric. You're poisoning yourself with the hope that you'll be able to kill off the tumor as well before the chemo kills you. And just thinking to myself,
Oh yeah,
who came up with that? Who is the absolute psychopath that think, oh, I'm just gonna get rid of my brain tumor by shooting myself in the head?
well, they're the ones that can't pay for the high class treatments, which by the way don't cure cancer either.
Yeah.
yeah,
So
it's like a hammer instead of a scalpel. Consider that chemotherapy. It will kill the cancer, but it will do collateral damage to every other cell in your body, and it'll also nuke your immune system. And then consider radiation treatments will irradiate your body. Which, sure, you've killed cancer, but then you also irradiated your body, which is going to cause more cancer later.
congratulations, you've installed ransomware into your body. Good work. By the way,
Yeah,
Esso, can you post that that unconventional case study into the chat so that people can see
yeah,
the
that's
article?
the actual one. That's the actual
I
one where
will.
50-year-old self-experimenting female virologist cured her own breast cancer with a viral therapy that she experimented on and made.
Yeah, there you
So
go.
it's not the shit there. It's real.
I mean, me personally, it's like if I ever get a cancer diagnosis, I'm going to do two things. One, go on a super strict keto diet. Two, weed. That's it. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
gonna do a
based.
whole bunch of other stuff to maintain my lifestyle, but that's gonna be my go-to anti-cancer strategy. If I die, at least I'm gonna die stoned.
Well, try a little harder than that, Filthy. I don't want you to die.
I don't intend on dying. That's why. I said. That's why the first thing I said was the super strict keto diet. I know it's like no fruit, no dairy, none of that other stuff that I can usually cheat with otherwise. Because if I do,
Yeah.
then the cancer will eat that up and I'll probably die. So my go-to strategy is just keep doing that until I am not at risk of dying anymore. And Dubs the drink. You already smoke weed daily, then you're fine.
If I get cancer, I'm smoking a PCP again.
The
That's
fuck
not
is
one
that?
I'd recommend. It's a hard drug and not one of the ones that you can get productive use out of. It's one of the ones that you hear stories of people taking and then like ripping people's faces off. Not like bath salts, but in that category.
That doesn't sound good at all.
Can't imagine it's particularly good.
It's not my scene, so I don't know much about. But
But can you show the audience about the PDF, the other one for the computer and computation,
I haven't been able
and
to
what
find
that
it.
really. Oh, it's here. I'll just quote it.
yeah, so in the meantime, if anybody wants some good resources for DIY medicine and methods they could use to get started with getting some basic medicine, antibiotics, painkillers, etc., go to Four Thieves Vinegar Collective. They have quite a few methods already openly hosted that could be downloaded for anybody.
So yeah, here's I just posted the link. No, not the. I just opened it. It's a thing from Cornell University. I hosted on Arvix, Arcsix,
arxiv.org.
Arxiv,
Arxiv, that works.
and yeah, they have.
Yeah, I don't
thing.
talking just talking to the chat. I don't use or encourage any drugs that fry your brain and actively mess with your brain chemistry. I only encourage ones that you could use for meditative purposes. So stick with cannabinoids and psychedelics.
So yeah, here's a right here. I have it on screen. A basic diagram of the basic idea of how a computer is supposed to work. Input, reagents and catalysts, program, chemical state machine, output, compound. You have a machine that spits out molecules, and you can utilize that as your input for the purposes of manufacturing the medicines that you need.
It could be any chemical for that matter. Because consider that what you're really describing here is you know what CNC actually stands for? Computer numerical control. You basically have a printer for chemistry.
I don't think any sane person would have an issue with that.
Imagine taking it to the logical conclusion of that you could make biochemicals. You could literally make let's see.
Peptides,
You could make
polypeptides.
Yeah. You could literally make your own vitamins. Imagine making your own vitamins.
Make your own.
Oh God, how much easier that would make dieting.
Imagine being able to mass produce protein powder so that you wouldn't have to deal with muscle decay over time. Or hell, why not just
I can
make a
eat,
virus that deletes one of your myostatin genes to make it so that your muscles no longer decay faster than they are repaired? So
I could eat
your muscle
nothing.
mass remains constant.
I could eat nothing but bread and potatoes and still stay healthy.
Well, I guess, but like you'd have to
I just said
re-engineer your
that.
metabolism to take care of that. But still, like this is just scratching the surface. Like in the next, even in the next decade, if people start getting on this, we're seeing horrors out of wildest nightmares or the most beautiful things you could imagine, depending on who uses it. But at the same time, that also implies that everyone who has the ability to learn this must learn this. Not just so that they can heal themselves, but to defend against others who would use this maliciously. Because even if the people who are made this, who make this, are like it does all that really. Hold on, give me a moment.
People can create viruses in their
That one is
garage.
capable of
Of,
doing this. That one is capable of doing this means that anyone is capable of doing this.
yeah, people can make viruses in their garage that spread cures to conditions. Also, people can make viruses in their garage. Oh shit. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's something that you need to know about. You need to have practical knowledge of these skills and the political economy as a result of the techniques that it depends on to sustain itself are never going to actually address these problems in a way that prevents people from like just killing each other on a mass scale if somebody happens to feel like it.
The state in late 2019 released a virus with the express purpose of killing crap tons of people. So, whether or not people and organizations are willing to release viruses with the intent to just like cause mass casualty events, that's not even controversial. We didn't even need these techniques for them to emerge. This is just giving people the tools to defend themselves biologically.
you literally have to defend yourself against bioterrorism by using the exact same tools to against that threat.
Well, the best part is that most people, as far as I'm aware, don't really have an interest in engaging in bioterrorism just because there's no gain for them. They see no purpose to it. So what you're going to have is like the two or three bad actors that are going to exist, or the many bad actors, are always going to be outnumbered by the people that just want to grill.
Yeah, that's not even the point. Fucking somebody could become crazy and make a disease in their garage. It's not a matter of like trying to moralize the reasons why people would or wouldn't. That's just a technique that exists now, and that's the way that if someone has knowledge, they can employ it in practice.
It's
So
at the point where to survive this threat, you have to take your own evolution into your own hands.
Because this tech,
Because if you don't invest in open source hardware, open source software, and open source bioware, you will be at threat to all proprietary means that will be used against you, that you will have no defense against.
we've already talked about
there's
making genetically modified viruses that can do things like remove your muscular dystrophy or eliminate your body, or rather reduce your body's ability to cause your muscles to decay faster than they grow. So why not do things like
You
make
could end
modifications to
cellular
your own
senescence.
biology? Why not introduce things like modifying your own biology to make yourself just completely incompatible with all diseases such that you couldn't possibly get an infection?
Imagine figuring out how to communicate between genetics and computer programming so that you could install open source operating system on your DNA. Imagine being able to have direct mental control over every cell in your body and just be a shapeshifter.
I mean, after all, why not have open source DNA? The state seems to be quite interested in making sure that DNA becomes proprietary.
I mean, look at what Monsanto did to all of those different breeds of apples that would have gone extinct if people hadn't preserved them. Think of how Monsanto literally burns down entire farms worth of crops if their genetically modified patented crop accidentally crossbreeds with their neighbors completely completely natural ungenetically modified crops. And Monsanto wins against them because intellectual property is used as a weapon against everyone else.
Well, and also it's
before it ends you.
Yeah, and it's also because the state, in the context of its propaganda model, portrays these entire techniques, first of all, as though they're interchangeable with the production processes that define how they emerge in political economies. But on top of that, they're also portrayed as though they're simply just interchangeable with the practice that they're serving as a tool to achieve in the first place. So it's not just Monsanto's gene modification, it's presenting what Monsanto did in the context of, for example, what Monsanto did in the context of this is gene modification in and of itself. This is the only expression of technique that it could ever be articulated through, and these are the only outcomes that could ever emerge as a result of it being employed. I mean, they're doing the same thing you can see right now with how they're describing AIs in the context of the propaganda model. There's always just that question that it seems like more people haven't asked, but like it bothered me ever since I was in my teens, I remember. Why not just approach the technique differently? But I didn't obviously understand the concept at that time, so I wouldn't have thought of it that way. But it's not that high of a concept, is it? Hey, just design things differently that changes cost input, and also by changing cost input, it changes all of the other implications of the production process that were dependent on that previous step being designed the way it was. Apparently, that's novel.
Well, the point that people are rather dissuaded from attempting to approach things differently because of propaganda. The way that things are classically developed is a result of experts having done it, and they're smarter than you and they know best, which means that whatever you thought of, they've thought of it first and rejected it for a reason.
There's always more than one way to solve a problem. In fact, that's the very purpose of iterative development.
There's more than one way to solve that problem. Doug, do you have a source for that claim? Where's your citation?
The source is your mother.
Which one?
That's not a PhD approved academic. Your source is invalid.
The source is I made it the fuck up because I'm the inventor and I can prove it.
Welcome to the future, everybody. We're still making Yo Mama jokes. Your mama's so fat she is the citation.
I assume nothing. I assume nothing and I make no propositions. Protecting myself from this situation. Alright, let's continue on with what we were talking about earlier,
Yeah,
I
we
guess.
still have more to go. This is only this. I mean, sure, we hit some pretty big shit here, but like, there's still more.
We didn't really get into permaculture and food cultivation.
Yeah,
Because yeah,
talking about
apologies for everybody who was in the last stream. For the last hour there, we kind of ran out of steam, and there wasn't water in the house where we're staying.
Oh man, I
But
just
this
realized
time we
like,
corrected for that.
just consider the implication of everything we talked about with genetic modification through viral insertion of beneficial DNA and genetic modification, and now apply that to
Yeah.
crops. The difference is that any kind of DNA sequence you create, you can just open source that. Have it if you
Yeah.
absolutely. Unfortunately, we're kind of in a situation where you have to put a license on DNA sequences, just simply because you know that Monsanto will swoop in and put a patent on top of on the thing that you made. But good news is that you can just make it public domain.
yeah, just make it Creative Commons or Creative Commons share alike or something. Of course, it doesn't have any teeth, but you can still prove that you created it and it's already out there, and other people can get the genetic code. Like, you need to start treating DNA like it's source code.
And if you,
So at that point, you have to go full open source.
and
Not just open source, but it has to be free, Libre, and open source. There's a reason I use the term Libre.
That may sound unexpected and even somewhat ridiculous to people, but even if you disagree, the state seems to agree with us. So, what you do with that information is entirely up to you. Because they certainly seem to be very interested and have so for decades of copywriting DNA.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
making
that means
people
that you are a
proprietary.
copyrightable thing. You have to take control of it. You have to open source your own DNA to yourself so that you can make your own repairs and upgrades. Here, I don't necessarily agree with GNU's take on copyleft, since it appeals to copyright as a system to try and reinforce the open source thing, but you know, they did a good job of bringing open source to the public, so I'm not going to put them down for that. So I want you to go check that link I just posted, and I want you to show that to the public.
I have it open right now.
The difference that Richard Stallman, the guy between the GNU project, that, you know, one of the major reasons why Linux took off as it did, but, you know, not the only, because, you know, there is versions of Linux that don't have GNU software in them. Like, you can make entirely non-GNU Linux, Mr. Richard Stallman. But the thing is that I agree with his concept that there should be a difference between FOSS and FLOSS. I want you to go read that to the public, if you could, please, Filthy, since you got that good radio host voice. And I want a little break to get some water.
The two political camps in the free software community are the free software movement and open source. The free software movement is a campaign for computer users' freedom. We say that a non-free program is an injustice to its users. The open source camp declines to see the issue as a matter of justice to the users and bases its arguments on practical benefits only. To emphasize that free software refers to freedom and not to price, we sometimes write or say free libre software, adding the French or Spanish word that means free in the sense of freedom. In some contexts, it works to use just libre software. A researcher studying practices and methods used by developers in the free software community decided that these questions were independent of the developer's political views, so he used the term FLOSS, meaning free/libre and open source software, to explicitly avoid a preference between the two political camps. If you wish to be neutral, this is a good way to do it, since this makes the names of the two camps equally prominent. Others use the term FOSS, which stands for Free and Open Source Software. This is meant to mean the same thing as FLOSS, but it is less clear, since it fails to explain that free refers to freedom. It also makes free software less visible than open source, since it represents open source prominently, but splits free software apart. Free and open source software is misleading in another way. It suggests that free and open source names a single point of view rather than mentioning two different ones. This conceptualization of the field is an obstacle to understanding the fact that free software and open source are different political positions that disagree fundamentally. Thus, if you want to be neutral between free software and open source, is clear about them, the way to achieve this is to say FLOSS, not FOSS. We in the free software movement don't use either of these terms because we don't want to be neutral on the political question. We stand for freedom, and we show it every time by saying free and libre or free libre.
You see, that's where I immediately disagree with the Free Software Foundation's perspective. It's because they tried to solve the problem politically instead of methodologically. And that's why GNU's GPL license is never going to actually fix the problem. That software itself must be treated as information, and copyright itself must be dismantled.
The effect of
To do that, you would have to subvert the very system that copyright uses to uphold itself.
Yeah, that's the fundamental problem with simply making something open source and treating that as though that gives users some sort of leverage in their relationship with the platform. Literally, all it means for a platform to be open source is just that it has its source code publicly hosted somewhere. Now, if the website or like the application that you're discussing is proprietary, then as far as your relationship with the platform, that changes virtually nothing as far as how it's designed or the way that you use it.
I'll give you an example. Remember that analogy that I made between genetics and code?
Yeah.
Consider that the human DNA, the Human Genome Project has already been mostly completed. There's already a template map of the human genome out there, publicly accessible. You could say that the human genome is already open source. But would you say that that whole human genome template is free?
No.
Sure, I mean, you could access it and download the whole thing, but, is it readily accessible? I wouldn't say so. Not so much. I mean, sure, you could go look at the Human Genome Project right now and say, hey, can I download the Human Genome Project? Why don't you go type that in as a search,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing really that having a website source code open does, as far as transparency, is it allows anybody who might happen to be looking over the entire source code of the application to identify a tiny change to one or two lines of code. You're kind of seeing the problem, though, even in practice, with treating this as though it meaningfully changes anything about the organization of these platforms. It's kind of like the equivalent of if there were some sort of, as if there were some sort of, well, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. It's kind of the equivalent of treating the fact that platforms have to have a terms of service as though the terms of service exists to give you leverage against the platform. I'll be right back. I gotta Refill my water real quick as well.
All right.
But still, back to the concept that I was trying to convey. If the Human Genome Project already exists and is already a basic template of it has already been completed, and you downloaded the entire database of the Human Genome Project and then use that to identify your own genome to yourself instead of outsourcing it to some other service that would then have access to your genome and then could use that to design a virus specifically to kill you. That's something that all of these genetic sequencing services, who do they answer to? Who shares that information with who? Because consider that there's like websites like Ancestry.com or other things like that, where if you publish your family tree history on there, they have access to all of that and they could sell that to whoever they want.
Yep, and let me just show you something really quick when I was browsing. Let me just show the.
And you could take one of their genetics tests, and then they have a copy of your DNA on file that they can then sell to anyone. The police, the CIA, FBI, government agencies across the planet, any old laboratory, anyone really. There's nothing stopping them. Their privacy policy is basically an I promise I'm not going to use this against you. But the thing is that every single fucking time you see all of these fucking corporations screw you over because they can operate however they wish and get away with it with a fine. Or even not a fine at all if they bribe politicians. Because corporations are extensions of government. Every single one of them.
They're necessary
and so
partners for the state to be able to outsource. They're necessary partners for the state to be able to outsource its functions to, because they're able to operate on an incentive model that's different than the state, because corporations are revenue maximizers, the state is a power maximizer.
Mm-hmm. But you see my point. Unless you rebuild the entire supply chain around self-sufficiency, self-hosting, and handcrafted production, you will never be free. But guess what? There are people across this planet who are already doing this, who are all operating on independent parts of this project, who all that's really needed is for them to all be put in communication with each other, and for all of their resources to be released to the public in such a way that are untakedownable. I don't know, say IPFS. I don't know, say making wikis on all of these things and then uploading them to IPFS, and then uploading them as ZIM files to make it so that anyone could download libraries of information, and then make it so that anyone can teach themselves how to take care of themselves and those they care about, and improve their own lives with tools that they make and can repair and are modular and are completely redesignable because you have the blueprints to them. And so every single component is repairable. If you take the concept of right to repair to its logical conclusion, you must be able to rebuild civilization from scratch.
And all of the equipment required to perform the techniques that we referenced would be perfect examples of easily reproducible tools that could be created with all four of the components required to set up a post-political economic network for yourself.
And consider that we didn't even go in depth about, HackerFab and open source ecology yet, did we?
No, we haven't. We've touched upon them as examples of organizations that are actively seeking to open source hardware, developing their own tools that are needed to allow people to be able to seize their own means of production, not just like simple things like hoes and rakes, but very complex machinery like 3D printers, CNC machines, circuit printers.
The Global Village construction set.
Yeah, right. We're talking like being able to do things like start a
Rebuild
garden with open source tools, to being able to build, like, mass-produce computers with
Yeah,
open
because
source
consider
tools.
if you found a way to link between open source ecologies tool set and HackerFab's tool set, you would have from the dirt and rocks in the ground to computer chip. A manufacturing path that is entirely open hardware, open source software. Consider the implications of that. Everyone in the audience, reflect upon that. You could play Factorio IRL.
Yeah, set up printers that could make every copy of their own components. Those printers could also create all of the parts required to create one of the chemical reactors being advertised by Four Thieves Vinegar Collective, just as one
We're at the
example.
point where the space race could literally be a global high score chart. Hey, we could all across the planet compete and cooperate towards getting to the space age.
But the way that all of this is presented in the context of propaganda is as though these are just these are almost fantastical ideals that aren't
We are on the
attainable.
cusp. We are on the cusp of Type 1 civilization on the individual level.
Is what I just explained, though, like the process of getting a 3D printer that's just capable of making all of its own components and then making all of these other parts. Does that sound as though it's too complicated for any person who's watching this video to set up? It may take some time and it may require learning something that you don't already understand, but it's certainly not out of reach.
There's already 3D
At
printers.
Especially because you don't have to be sorry.
There's already recursive 3D printers. Like, those exist, and there's not only exist, but they're scalable and modular.
There's already a project called the RepRap printer that's capable of printing at least most of its parts except for the metal. But consider that there's additive manufacturing for metal now using basically like micro welding metal to make shapes. So consider that not only that exists, but PCB printers exist, which a PCB stands for printed circuit board. So consider what that means. If you took all of those components together, you could engineer a 3D printer that is capable of 100% reproducing every single one of its components, including the CPU and circuit boards that it's running on. And then you could even just make it print a USB cable if you had the correct tools, and then connect the old one to the new one to upload the OS from the old one onto the new one, and you have an entirely reproducible machine, software and hardware all.
Beautiful. Now, Gerson Lopez asks, can you elaborate on the Type 1 civilization point? Yeah, that's just a reference
Okay,
to
have you ever heard of the Kardashev scale? Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to describe it.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, pull up the Wikipedia article on it.
Yeah, I actually wanted to show something else, but I'll talk about it here. The Kardashev scale just represents the amount of energy that a civilization would have access to and control over. And Type 1 represents a civilization having control over the energy of an entire planet, in this case Earth. Which, just to put this in perspective, it's estimated that the Earth is around 0.85 to 0.9 in terms of its placement on the Kardashev scale. So Type 1 basically means that we're able to begin exploring the solar system in earnest rather than just sending out probes. And so the idea here in referencing Type 1 is not that we, as the entirety of humanity, are able to explore the entirety of the universe, but rather that each individual person, you personally, are a Type 1 civilization. You have access to an amount of energy equal to that available on the Earth, and you can just do whatever you want with it. And the same things would go for me, same thing would go for Esso and Douglas, same thing would go for anyone else here.
You can literally, on a personal scale, have all of the blueprints and technology necessary for you to be considered a Type 1 civilization being. As in, you are capable of performing the actions of a Type 1 civilization classification on an individual scale. That should be the game that we're all playing. Everyone across this planet, we should be working together, cooperating and competing towards racing towards actually getting off this planet. Terraforming worlds.
Building Dyson swarms.
Making Dyson swarms. Hell, we could literally just start disassembling the asteroid fields, turning them into von Neumann probe, or turning them into O'Neill cylinders. Imagine a Dyson swarm that is able to house the land space of Earth times 10,000.
No, not times 10,000, times 10. Like, we're talking trillions and trillions.
Imagine having a personal space station as an RV. That's what we're talking about. See, I want to fly that RV like it's like fucking sci-fi fantasy fusion shit, man. Like, you could literally just have space RV, like Spaceballs and shit.
Oh yeah.
You know that? You guys know that movie?
Yes.
That fucking movie is hilarious.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Now, Gerson Lopez asks, so as part of reaching full human potential, private space exploration? Well, what you decide...
Yes.
I actually disagree.
Personal space exploration.
I disagree because what one counts, I think what is human potential and the extent of it is ultimately up to the human. So...
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree with that point.
Now, actually, there is one point I wanted to bring up really quick in regards to the Human Genome Project, because I had this stream focused on the webpage of the Human Genome Project, specifically the bottom, for a while now, for the purposes of bringing attention to 3 of the logos that appear at the bottom of the page on the home page. The logo for the NIH. Can you send me the... Oh, okay, give me a moment here. There you go. So we have the logo for the NIH, the logo for the HHS, Health and Human Services, as well as for USA.gov. So that should give you a pretty good idea of who their strategic partners are.
Oh, look, they have a copyright button.
Yeah,
great.
I wonder what's there. Copyrighted text, liability. Yeah, put simply, Human Genome Project glows.
There needs to be an open source Human Genome Project, because this one's entirely government run.
Yeah, and for those of you who aren't aware, the NIH was very heavily involved in the funding and subsequent cover-up of the creation of COVID-19 and its release from the lab.
You know, I find that very suspicious, too, because consider that the spike protein was engineered via gain-of-function research for the explicit purpose of engineering a biomolecule that would attach to a, what was it called? Let's see, I might be wrong, but I think it was called the ACE2 receptor.
I think the ACE2 receptor is the one that causes inflammation in the human blood vessels.
Exactly, that one. So imagine that the spike protein was specifically bioengineered for the purpose of attaching to that receptor to make your immune system go into panic mode and think that every single part of your body is having inflammation.
Yeah, it's one thing that I'm actually it makes perfect sense now, but I'm actually...
It could have only happened if the Human Genome Project was leveraged to create that.
It definitely was. They were using information. I don't know if this for certain, but it seems to me a perfectly reasonable pattern of behavior, both based on the state's prior actions as well as what we know about how the COVID-19 virus was developed, that it would be consistent for them to leverage what they learned in the Human Genome Project to develop a suffering maximization virus.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Your entire body attacking yourself, that's just maximum suffering because every part of your body would just feel like it's inflamed. That's probably what this whole long COVID thing that they're trying to talk about is.
I really don't think
Permanent
so.
inflammation.
I disagree, actually.
Really?
Yeah, my
Explain.
basis is that for some reason we knew about, or we were told what long COVID was, and that they were releasing studies in like July and August of 2020 listing like prevalences of symptoms of long COVID before, which would imply that they were studying the effects of long COVID long before anyone would have even gotten long COVID, which signaled to me that it was an attempt to construct a narrative around the long-term effects of the death jab.
Mm.
Nowadays, like I think I mentioned before in the last stream, that I saw an article hosted on weather.com about the effects of long flu.
Mm.
They're basically just making they're basically just calling random diseases or random side effects of the death jab a result of, oh, it's because you were previously infected by this thing, which maybe that's possible. Maybe. What Douglas talked about, the spike protein, yes, that's very, very possible. However, it seems to me that the death jab, which was obviously designed as a bioweapon, seems to be a more likely culprit to me.
Well, the literal virus itself was also designed for the explicit purpose of being a bioweapon. So it was like they engineered a problem, and then they engineered a reaction to that problem, and then they engineered a worse problem as a solution, which is also the same engineered problem in the beginning. So the entire thing was just a trap.
They call it long flu or long COVID because it happens as a result of people going too long without paying their subscription to the pharmacy god in the form of getting another booster.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. But before we get distracted back into that again, we gotta give some people some hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take a look at the open source ecology wiki, not just the main website, but the wiki itself. And I want you to go browse through there and look at some of the pages.
All right, I'm just going to open it up and then I'm going to browse things that catch my eye.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Open source ecology.
I want...
or is that not where we are?
I don't want to... the Global Village Construction Set.
Yes, finally we're getting on to crop cultivation. Because that's basically the most important thing to understand for food and medicine.
So here is a percentage of completion, at least at the time that this picture was made, of 2018. It's hard to say how much progress they've made since then, but take a look at the percentage of completion of the various techs that they had, or that the Open Ecology group was working on. And you can see that they're 100% done with a 3D printer, a micro house, a CEB press, and I don't know what a power cube is.
Probably a battery bank to control a hydraulic system.
Maybe.
They also have a micro tractor.
Mostly
that
done.
Is pretty much almost done.
Universal rotor, soil pulverizer, laser cutter. Oh, that's actually of interest to me. Oh, that's like 80% done. Damn. Tractor, not a micro tractor, tractor, mostly done. And everything up to the...
Gasifier burner.
Yes. There we go. Trencher. Dimensional sawmill.
That name.
That name implies that we not only cut this log, but we recut every instance of that log across every timeline. I'm sure that's not what that
We
means.
cut
I'm
the
sure.
log.
My guess is that the saw apparatus is actually on like a rotation system, so that you could cut it at an angle without having to move the log. But
We don't
That's
cut
not
the log structure. We cut the log structurally.
oh, there's also the open source automobile, which is 20% done, but the sheer fact that they were working on that is actually kind of relevant to what we were discussing earlier. Maybe not in this stream, but we've certainly talked about it in the back alley, where actually no, we kind of have talked about it previously, where the 3D metal printed auto components necessarily means that with enough development, people would just have open source cars that they can just print, and each part would be completely replaceable and modular. Oh, you got a belt
That's
that's
fine.
broken? Just
Funny
replace it with a
because there
new
is a
chain.
design on there.
That's after presumably people become not even presumably, just if in order for this to be a norm, people on average, and I'm not really I'm not specifying a percentage of the population or anything. Enough people where it's a norm that you can just walk up to any person, and there's a good chance that they're going to be in a post-political economic network. But once you're at that point, yeah, you will see people just start making their own cars, like it's no big deal. And just like with computers, as we've discussed previously, the implications of people not just being able to print their own vehicles, but to design their own vehicles based on their own techniques is going to get really interesting really quickly.
What the heck is team culturing? No, I think it's just. Let's see here. Just reading through this real quick. Yeah, the whole thing is just like teaching people how to network citing something called distributive economics, which admittedly I'm not super familiar with. So let's click on that link. Let's see what we get. Distributed economics is an economic paradigm which promotes the equitable distribution of wealth through a combination of open design of products, processes, services, and other economically significant information, flexible fabrication, and open business models towards replicability. This means that replication is promoted to as many economic players as possible. So, not the terms that I would use, but yeah, they're kind of talking about exactly what we're talking about here, where they recognize that it's in their interests that as many people as possible get a hold of their tools and make use of them as quickly as possible, and to learn how to use them more importantly.
Yeah, described something kind of similar in the Drive link of trying to recreate the dynamic of mutualism in ecosystems in the context of sociology by means of changing the way in which people sustain themselves. That just being an implication of people becoming self-sufficient through methods that allow them to do so outside of the context of white markets and based on everything, like producing everything that they would use to fund the whole process. Specifically, the way in which it's comparable is that the thought process here is that because of the fact you're basing this setup, this economic model, off of simply the architecture of the building that you're designing and its relationship with the ecosystem surrounding it, then it can play a similar role in that environment to the relationship between a bee and a flower and the process of pollination, which is the usual example that's cited to describe mutualism in ecosystems. It's basically an exchange which can occur that's profitable for the ends of both parties involved, and it doesn't require a cost simultaneously because of the fact that the norms gaming that interaction are also defined by what's maintaining the ability for the technique to be performed itself. So the input that is required to perform the technique is also the output that's profitable for the people using it for either some part of the production process to keep maintaining it, or for the directed ends of the users and what they're aiming to accomplish out of associating that way.
Yeah. Right now, I'm just. I like what J.C. Armitage said. It would be nice not to have to see the same damn cars on the road all the time. Can't agree more. The way that the way the cars are designed now is just completely dull and lifeless.
Well, and on top of that, they're just looking increasingly blocky and polygonal, like
I,
Tesla truck.
I think the Cybertruck is actually an outlier. I mean that thing is just an abomination of design. But like just the way like all cars are shaped exactly the same with like maybe some slight variations in the placement and the shape of their headlights. You can't really tell the difference. Whereas when people start being able to just 3D print their own cars, you're going to see just like all sorts of crazy and spectacular designs. Some are going to be retro, some are going to be a little bit more conventional, but maybe some out there. And then there's going to be some things that are just going to be like really, really out there. And it's going to be wild. I can't wait for that.
Life just becomes a cartoon for a little while.
Where have you been? It's been a parody the environment's been a parody of itself for like a decade now.
I didn't say parody, I said cartoon. I meant to imply the exaggerated portrayal, placing emphasis on that aspect of it, not that it's a parody.
Well, it's already an exaggerated portrayal of itself.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that's not going to be a sentiment I would describe because of the fact that that would imply I have some sort of investment in modernity, and therefore I have a standard for what I think is normal in the context of it, other than rebelling against it.
All right. Also, the optimistic pessimist wants to know our thoughts on quantum computing.
I suppose it would depend on what you mean, because
I understand vaguely how it works through using interference patterns for calculations, but I don't know enough about it to build one. So talking about it is, well, not feasible for me because I don't functionally understand how I would build one with the resources I have available.
Yeah, it operates. Well, I mean, first of all, that's an entire conversation. Just whether or not
I'm more focused on biocomputers, to be honest.
Yeah, but whether or not it's even actually possible to emulate software the way that people who are describing the function of quantum computers would imply that the projects that they're advertising as quantum computers would end up producing, mainly because they assume that essentially that you can represent the entirety of what's relevant in actually causing a program to function in the software side of the computer. So there's already some errors I'm noticing just in the premise of how that task is being approached. But aside from that, I'm seeing a lot of articles as well talking about quantum computing or quantum electronics. And I noticed that the term quantum is used in the context of technology, the same as basically it's used the same way that Marvel movies use it, where most of the time when it's being referenced in the title of an article, it's basically just a sentence enhancer that is being employed by the fucking author of the article to make themselves sound more knowledgeable than they actually are.
It is. Yeah, my thoughts are that they're trying really, really hard to try to develop something that ultimately people, or that they're not expecting consumers to use. They're kind of trying to create the master computer system from not really like any particular source of fiction, but just the idea that like you've heard Marxoids try to make arguments about how central planning would work if we just had a sufficiently powerful computer. I think they're trying to build a sufficiently powerful computer. However, it's going to be used exclusively by technocrats and rulers as a means of, as basically a surveillance tool, a means by which a tool by which to use large language models and algorithms to optimize the efficiency of their oppression.
Yeah, and there's a big problem with the way that it's even conceived of. I mean, first of all, it would require superpositions in physics to be a valid concept.
I wouldn't dive into that. There are valid ways to make quantum computers, but the way that superposition is described in a lot of those situations is totally wrong. You know, I think I actually posted something about that one time that if I can find it, you could show on stream if I can. Let's see. Give me a second.
Dead air. Sorry.
About that. Go ahead and talk while I go find that.
Okay, so
that thing.
let's see here. The I had another thought. Was it about pharmaceutical companies? Oh no, it was about mental health. That's right. I mean, to the extent that mental health can be described as a valid phenomena. I mean, I was talking about before the stream started how absurd it is that, like, just in the last 10 years, I've noticed that more and more people have started to become at least aware of the extent to which mental health, which is really just describing psychological phenomena and emotional supercomplexes like depression, anxiety, etc., and how destructive it is for the morale and well-being of the individuals affected by it. There's a lot more awareness about it, like a lot more, and personally I consider that to be a positive. However, if you ever needed an example, like just the example of how the government just doesn't care about you at all and how states just don't give a crap, then you need only to point to what is even openly advertised in mainstream media as the mental health crisis as the perfect example, because despite all of this awareness and all of this outcry, they use the exact same techniques for quote-unquote dealing with it that they've been using for the last few decades. I mean, hell, you can't even, like, if you're a veteran, you can't talk about any kind of mental health problems you may or may not be having, because otherwise the nurses or doctors you're talking to are legally obligated to have the cops sent to your home on quote-unquote wellness checks. And, well, let's just say that more than a few veterans have died because of wellness checks.
I found the image, by the way.
Excellent.
Nope, that's the wrong one.
I want to see it, though.
Alright.
Where the fuck is it?
Well, and there are...
There it is.
Alright. Just what I was going to say is...
Go ahead and open that in your browser.
I would be putting a lot more emphasis now that we can identify what causes traumas from a neurological perspective and contextualize that in a study of action. I would be putting a lot more emphasis on the fact that as an organization, in order for the state to exist, it functionally requires forcing itself upon you and traumatizing you, therefore denying you the ability to self-cultivate around social norms you create for yourself, which therefore denies you the ability to develop your own sense of identity.
I can show this comic on stream, but
Yeah, please do.
it's a lot, and I don't think
Just zoom in and pull through.
Just zoom in and pull through.
Yeah, zoom in and scroll through it. And then I guess one of you narrated it if you decide to.
I think it'd be better just to find the link and then post it in the chat.
Well, that's the funny thing is I don't remember the I mean, it says the title right up there.
Trying to load it in my browser. Big. Oh yeah, I remember this one.
Yeah.
Google already developed a quantum chip called the Willow. Yeah, that's one of the main reasons that I don't think that this is going to end up in consumers' hands anytime soon. Because part of the things I think that's required for a quantum computer to work is that components need to be held at absolute zero or near absolute zero, which the energy requirements for that are just beyond most people's resources.
Superposition doesn't mean and, but it also doesn't mean or. It means a complex linear combination of a state, of a zero state and a one state. You should think of it as a new ontological category. In other words, you're making shit up and now you're saying that you can have it both ways.
No, what's actually trying to be conveyed there is that you can't think of it in binary anymore. You got to think of it like what angle is the charge, which means that you end up with the probability space of all possible angles that the charge could be in.
I think
yes, but that's treating it as though you can represent it as a function within the existing rules that were used to represent what you're describing. And the problem is, from a technical perspective, is that that's creating a self-reference to the validity of your original description of it.
What are you talking about?
I think he's talking about the problem with trying to describe quantum superposition.
Because superposition doesn't exist. It's not a simultaneous 1 and 0. It explained it right there, and I've been able to verify it in other places that what it's actually trying to talk about is complex numbers. You ever study complex numbers?
Yes.
Not really, no.
No.
Also, someone in chat is complaining. Someone in chat is saying that there's a problem with the sound. Can you guys hear us okay?
Yeah, what's the issue with the sound?
I don't know. That's what someone in chat said. I mean, I'm picking you guys up fine. There's been no interruptions. There might just be a brief connection thing.
Hmm.
I yeah, I heard it when I just tested it for a second there, so it should come through just fine.
Yep. Yeah, I think we're okay.
Could you go back to that page where you were looking at distributive economics?
Sure.
I'd like you to go over the rest of that, or at least skim it.
Yeah. Distributive economics starts with product development and enterprise as a foundation for a prosperous society with modern comforts which allow for self-determination on personal and political scale. The enterprise part has several requirements. 1. Design repository. A global repository of freely downloadable designs can help any designer start an enterprise, from a small farmer to a high-tech innovator, by providing immediate access to best practices of economically significant products in production without having to reinvent the wheel. In today's competitive world, there is no repository of optimized designs. These are either proprietary or patented, and by default, most producers provide inferior products, with few produce the state of the art. This is a model that works, but wastes tremendous amounts of human creativity and energy. By opening up access to best practices, costs would go down, and access to the best products would increase. Yeah. Appropriate scale. In his seminal book, Small is Beautiful, E.F. Schmauer.
Schumacher?
Schumacher.
Schumacher?
That might be right. Schumacher.
Sorry, I butchered your name.
I'm not very good with you. I keep saying this in stream after stream after stream, and eventually people are going to pick up on this. I am very bad with names. Discuss that the most holistically efficient economic processes occur not on the global scale, but on the regional and community scale. Schumacher's viewpoint, while generally accepted as true, is not widely practiced today. Distributed economics favors a scale which does not incur inefficiencies of large-scale overhead costs, bureaucracy, communication costs, logistics, others. Schumacher's conclusion is that human organizations break down after they reach a certain size, which suggests that in order for enterprise to be efficient, it should not be overtly large. Yeah, that's just there's a term for that actually, economics of scale, or it's economy of scale rather.
Yeah, and it needs to not be proprietary, because you'll see that from an organizational perspective, what goes wrong in its own function, that being a proprietary organization, is usually conflicts of interest that are inherent to the function of the firm between levels of management and either one another or the laborers on the floor or whatever that they're trying to manage. Like, I'll get a perfect example, and one that Kevin Carson cites in his book, the Homebrew Industrial Revolution. The incentive to report somewhat, like the incentive for a manager to report resources being destroyed if a laborer accidentally drops one off a shelf and breaks it, versus their incentive to not report it, because if they do, the firm is supposed to penalize them.
Pretty much, yeah.
Well,
Max,
can't really say that that's a problem from the perspective of the proprietary firm. It's just functioning as usual in that case. But yeah, that's exactly the point, and that's the problem.
3. Flexible fabrication. Maximum distribution of the fruits of production occurs via flexible fabrication. Bit of a self-reference there, I think. Sorry. Flexible fabrication allows producers to A. Make products today using today's best designs. Inflexible fabrication forces producers to face the dilemma of either B. Continuing to produce inferior products that may have been the best known design years ago when the production line was set up, or C. Not producing anything at all for a few weeks while the old line is torn down and a new line is set up. 4. Lifetime.
It's almost like it's almost like we're seeing someone else almost reach the same conclusions that we did, but
Yeah, I mean, the fact
without having the context of propositional logic just making your brain go in loops.
the fact that planned obsolescence can even happen is an example
An
that really
industrial,
highlights.
it,
That's an
it
entire
can only happen if there is a central
Industrialization.
authority on industrial. Yeah,
Yeah, that's an entire practice that only makes sense from the perspective of producing the end product, from the perspective of the organization that's making them, based on incentives that they don't even internally decide. It's entirely just social engineering.
It's not quite social engineering so much as it is incentives that exist around industrial production because their organization is primarily just revenue maximization. And if they produced the best, most durable products that they could that lasted for many, many years, then what incentive would consumers have to go back after the products break down if it's just not breaking down? If I recall correctly, there's a story about the inventor of nylon who actively made the nylon formula worse because people weren't buying more nylon because wasn't breaking down.
Well, that's just the product of a couple of generations of social engineering. But there's traits that almost every single person has that's the product of thousands of years of social engineering. One example being how there's a connection between the posture you use to write words down and the way that your focus is directed. I mean, pens and paper didn't always exist, but that's a standardized technique of writing that was institutionalized. That one's not even that big of a deal, but it's just an example of how, over enough time, actual physiological changes can happen to people as the product of social engineering. And there are a handful of instances where it's not trivial like that actually has had a pretty significant impact on the way people have developed. And I think the one that stands out is the Oedipal structure, like the main one that stands out. The nuclear family, in other words, as the post World War II propaganda model started referring to it.
Yeah, we were talking with someone in the back alley not too long ago about how the nuclear family is a relatively recent concept in human history that's not even 100 years old, and yet propaganda has inundated us with the impression that no, the nuclear family has actually been the norm throughout human history. I mean, it's in the name, nuclear
No,
family.
fundamentally, yeah, fundamentally, if you simply reflect on the dynamic that exists between the people in that kind of social arrangement, well, first of all, uh, marriage being an institutionalized practice definitely ensures that most people are going to start having kids, not just in a way that's going to reproduce that sort of family dynamic, but also in a way where the people having kids are going to start looking at having a child as a financial investment. And that's basically the fucking association that's led to most of the intergenerational trauma that people suffer and have to deal with constantly.
Sounds about right. Anyways, continuing on the list, lifetime design, maximizing the useful lifetime of a product by design reduces the cost of access to that product. For example, if a product lasts 100 years instead of 10 years, its cost is essentially reduced by a factor of 10, assuming that the initial product cost is the same. Well, over the course of 100 years, yes, the cost of making 10 as opposed to 1 will be, well, it'll be 10 times cheaper. I mean, there's a lot of more that's going to go into it, whether or not a certain formula or chemical that increases or decreases durability has certain inputs or outputs that affect its relative value. But I think it's safe to say that there will be repositories of information for producing certain materials and what their effects even expected are going to be, and given everything else being the same, more people are going to choose to produce more durable goods for themselves as opposed to identical but less durable alternatives. Put simply, planned obsolescence, as we described earlier, is a thing that only exists in industrial economies, and local economies have no reason to produce goods that are just strictly worse. Anyways, 5. Free enterprise. This means truly free enterprise where the playing field is leveled by open access to best practice information, optimized product design, optimized production process design, and other economic analysis. This is the opposite of monopoly capitalism enforced by welfare state Keynesian economics.
Based. Also, I don't think we can hear Doug. He's talking.
No, I'm just not speaking.
It was somebody else, alright. My bad. I have other roommates at the house. I thought one of them was Doug.
6. Responsibility. Accountability of communities for creating complete local economies implies autonomy on the local scale, while providing positive feedback loops for social and environmental responsibility. The intervening role of the welfare state is diminished as the people take responsibility for their own well-being within their own communities.
Also based.
Yeah. It stands to reason that when individuals network with each other and their interests become intertwined with each other, that they bear some sense of investment in other people within their environment, even if it is just the person you buy apples from happens to be their friend. Or happens to be a friend of the guy who buys apples because you kind of like him and you want him to be well off. Anyways,
Yeah.
Radical cost reduction, as opposed to regular cost reduction. Lifetime design combined with DIY production can result in 100-fold cost reduction for a given product. For a whole set of products, such as infrastructure for an entire community, radical hypermodularity can result in another factor 10 reduction if a given component is used over in other applications like industrial strength Lego blocks. Thus, radical cost reduction of 1,000 times is possible when a community seizes complete control over its own economic production by attending to lifetime design, local production, and hypermodularity.
Well, and as we've pointed out, it's not just cost reduction. It's you can fundamentally change what profit even is because you can change what counts as property.
I like the idea of the industrial strength Lego blocks. We're in IRL Minecraft, boys.
Yes.
Let's click on hypermodularity
Yeah,
real quick.
Making houses.
I like that phrase.
Legos.
Well, this is probably the simplest wiki page I've ever seen. Hypermodularity.
Oh yes, people. Yeah, you were telling me the comparison to a cartoon earlier might have been too far fetched, but you're sitting here telling me that people are going to be making their own vehicles and making fucking houses out of Lego bricks. I don't know. I'm trying to imagine this in my head, and it definitely sounds like a scene out of a cartoon.
And yet here's the weirder part. The people who are making Minecraft cars that work IRL, those are the sane ones.
Well, yeah, because people who are still... The alternative is people being invested in either propaganda or some management perspective in the white market. Either you don't think it's possible, or you're you're deluding yourself.
Yeah, because by the time we get
one
to...
way or another, you're deluding yourself.
by the time we get to Minecraft cars, these techniques will already be widely known about, distributed, and available. So you're either in the process, there's three options as far as I'm aware. You either have one, you're in the process of getting one, either by acquiring the materials and you haven't gotten them yet, or you're actively just still constructing it and it's not finished yet, or you're too invested in the political economy for whatever reason. Yeah, Minecraft is actually libertarian.
Yeah. Indeed. That's what actual homesteading looks like. It's a simulation of it.
Just flex on the state by building dirt houses. Dirt block houses.
Just baked dirt.
There's actually kinds of houses.
Literally, we need to tell people about the Primitive Technology channel because I swear that channel is a fucking goldmine.
We mentioned it in the last stream.
Yeah, we did.
I know, but like,
yeah, I think it's worth re-emphasizing though.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, not just that, but like also the YouTube channel, The Thought Emporium. If anyone in the audience has watched them. Yes, my favorite video, genetically editing tomatoes so that they're spicy.
How would the flavor work? Oh wait, it's basically
spicy tomato.
Wait, that's basically just a peppery pizza.
Yeah.
What?
You're baking tomatoes.
Yes, genetically modifying yeast so it produces spider silk. Yes, genetically modifying yeast so it produces deer milk.
Yes, genetically modifying viruses so that I can cure my own lactose intolerance.
Yes.
For a year and a half.
Epic. It's epic. Now imagine if plasmid permanently bonded with his DNA. He would just never have lactose intolerance again.
Well, from what I can recall about how that worked specifically, it didn't genetically modify him. It was meant to genetically modify his gut bacteria, such that they would be able to...
Oh?
No, actually I was wrong. Not the gut bacteria, I was wrong again. It was actually modifying...
It genetically modified the cells of the colon.
Yeah, to produce the enzyme that allows it to break down lactose.
Yeah.
Alright, we're getting word that the audio is starting to cut in and out.
Oof.
Strange.
Right.
That's not good. But yeah, just so... Yeah, there's a lot of YouTube channels that showcase them utilizing primitive tools and primitive techniques, like stuff you can just get in your backyard, in order to make some pretty impressive technology. Like you mentioned last stream about how primitive technology reached the Iron Age based on stuff that he was able to recover from a riverbed.
Yeah, he literally took bacteria that consumed iron, filtered it down, and then cooked it into iron bits, and then melted it in a blast furnace that he made from hand into like iron pellets that he then made into basically a basic knife. So he reached the Iron Age single-handedly, and I find that the most impressive thing I think I've ever seen someone do.
But really what I would love to see is after people become economically self-sufficient, they network together, and then they simply start creating permacultures. Like that's something that even like obviously prioritize your own food supply first, but not just food forests, but really any sort of plant that could be cultivated and used, but also plays a role in sustaining an ecosystem. Just deliberately start tearing up as much fucking field as possible, planting like sunflowers or really any crop that you can manage to you could manage to make useful in the context of the permaculture that you're designing, then just get that done as quickly as possible and give people an investment in just going out in the environment, but also treating it as though it's just a food supply.
Just
So it's both. That's establishing the mutualistic dynamic with their ecosystem.
I know that there's like in the Midwest, there's a crap ton of fields, like farm fields, that have been bought up by Bill Gates that look like free real estate to me because who do you think is enforcing the property titles? Obviously the state, but I'm alluding to the fact that like is Bill Gates like really keeping watch? And is he actually like growing stuff on it? No, that's he's just keeping it. He's just keeping it so that
I've
no
seen
one
a
else
lot
can
of
use it.
dead farmland.
Sorry?
I've seen a lot of dead farmland, man. It's actually really depressing to look at.
Yeah, that's just done to create artificial scarcity, and it only exists because of titles. So, I mean, you can take that approach if you want. I was really just thinking of, like, helping farmers become self-sufficient as the obvious approach, and then convincing them to tear up their fields and create permacultures out of them. But yeah, I mean, if you're gonna talk about farmland that's being kept vacant by people like Bill Gates, I would deliberately look for places like that too, or just like national parks. Really, the one that I've specifically had my eyes on, and that I can't even really believe that this still exists in the U.S. But if anybody who's watching this has ever seen it, so that there's apparently a several 100-mile hiking trail that runs through the Appalachian mountain range that just cuts. There's like several stretches of it that are just like dozens of miles in the woods, and it cuts in and out of small towns and runs randomly through highways. Why have people not gone into the woods there and organized and started creating permacultures or camps they could use to just get themselves self-sufficient and make copies of everything that's self-sufficient out there? If you want to really get away from the political economy as quickly as possible, and also create a sort of informal hub that people could go to and know that they're going to be able to find somebody they could get self-sufficient with, that would be an ideal strategy for doing so.
Hey guys, I think we're having audio problems or at least connection problems with the stream because I noticed that the viewers dropped off quite a lot.
Uh-oh, guess we said too many spicy things and now we're getting DDoSed.
Somebody said that they closed the app and restarted it. Now the audio is fine for them.
Oh, okay. And it jumped.
You heard
The audio issue big of a problem for everybody, or is it just a handful of people?
There might be a handful of people. Actually.
Yeah,
I saw it
it
jumped
made
up a lot.
All right.
But yeah.
Well, I mean, we could wrap up here anyway, because unless you want to cover more, but
Well, I mean, other than covering open source college, oh yeah, HackerFab, and we didn't cover HackerFab yet.
Well,
we could go into that. Although we discussed a lot of open source hardware in the last stream.
Yeah, but it's still a practical example of some of groups of people who are already doing what we're describing. That if you took all of the open source ecology stuff, forked it, self-hosted it, and then started a GitHub repository. There's already a GitHub repository for all of their blueprints already. So just go there, fork that GitHub repository, and then work towards developing your own HackerFab toolkit to make your own electronics, and then just make a 3D printer capable of printing itself. If you can do that, then you have the key towards being able to self-host civilization.
Yeah, I just posted a link to HackerFab, and we could probably talk about that in the next stream a bit
Everyone
more
who's
because
technically minded, you know to know about distributive economics. All right, get them to know about HackerFab and open source ecology and Four Thieves Vinegar Collective and even groups like the Freedom of Form Foundation for the furries out there who want to biohack and make cybernetic tails. Man, like there's just all of this stuff is already out there.
People out there.
The truth is out there.
People are already figuring out how to leverage their existing knowledge and techniques to achieve some very radical things. You have open source ecology using open source tools to build their own houses. You have Freedom of Form Foundation trying to help people be able to express themselves beyond the limits of their biology. You have Four Thieves Vinegar Collective helping people being able to DIY their own medicine. And HackerFab is trying to make circuit printers.
Alright. I think we should go ahead and wrap up here, though.
Yeah, just want to say really quick.
All right.
These four alone, these are just ones that we know of, and I'm pretty sure that there are plenty more that just simply do not have the same notoriety or simply aren't as well known. So there's plenty of reason to be hopeful, and if there's one thing I can say with a high degree of confidence, very, very high degree of confidence, is that the state is going to do everything in its power to make sure that as many people as possible get galvanized into recognizing them as the means by which they no longer become subject to political shenanigans.
Yeah, becoming self-sufficient initially, it's going to be a struggle, but simply because of what ends are going to be the result of the means being employed in practice, that you have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen as a result of it, and it's going to be pretty amazing, at least in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I agree. Anyways, yeah, we're going to be wrapping up the stream now, so yeah.
I guess questions then from the audience, if there's any left.
Yeah, there's people here. Hey, everybody who's left. Yeah, it is kind of a small crowd, just because I imagine that has to do with the fact we didn't really get a chance to promote this much before we put it out. Yeah, it's nice seeing you again as well. Optimistic, pessimist, everybody really who's in chat. Mm-hmm. And next stream is going to be really spicy. I was planning on getting into something if I had a bit more time, or if this stream hadn't trended more in the direction of just discussing resources. But yeah, we kind of have a decent idea conceptually of how the culture war narrative developed, and we have receipts to prove it.
All right. Anyways,